As a sports fan, I have to confess. Sometimes the game gets kind of boring. That's when I unfold my Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 7 and use multi-window viewing on its large screen. Boring game? I'm checking out my fantasy baseball league at the same time. Score still 1-0? I'm replying to emails in the other window, scoring points with the boss. Semifinals finally getting exciting? I'm buying tickets to the finals and booking my flights. Can your phone do that?
The new Galaxy Z Fold 7. Get yours at Samsung.com.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Hey, welcome to another episode of The Eagle, a Times Union podcast. I'm Jessica Marshall. Since the dawn of human civilization, the boundaries between the communities that we live in have constantly shifted and changed. New countries have formed, broken up, and reformed. Small rural towns have grown into booming metropolises. Large cities have fallen and become the stuff of legend. Metro areas have sprawled. Whether or not you agree with the reasons for the changes to a particular municipality, that they will evolve and change somehow is a constant. New York's capital region is no exception. The 10 counties, or 7 or 4, depending on your viewpoint, all have extensive histories that date back hundreds of years. Its largest cities, Albany, Schenectady, Troy, and Saratoga Springs, are among the oldest in the country. They have distinct identities, yet at the same time, they're all connected as the 880,000 person metro area that we call the Capital Region. Times Union columnist Chris Churchill recently wrote about an idea to combine the Capital Region's municipalities into one mega city, and whether that could ever become a reality. He joins me now on The Eagle to talk more about it. I'm calling it a mega city. Like this idea that Chet Opalka had of making the whole Capital Region one giant city. When did this come about?
I mean, it's an idea that is kicked around for a while. Chet points to studies that were done in the 90s that suggested this was a good idea. It's been done in other places, New York City probably most famously or most close to here.
But New York City did that like hundreds of years ago, right? Like not recently.
Late 1800s. But Toronto has done it more recently. The other places have done it. I think what would be different here is that you'd really be joining very, very urban neighborhoods like Central Troy and Albany with very, very rural places. And while there might have been rural places that were included in the New York City map way back when, it is hard to, at least for me, to wrap my head around Grafton and Schenectady being in the same city.
So what are the pros of doing this? What are, according to him, according to, your research, what are the pros of doing something like this?
He believes that basically he's talking about putting the 4 capital region counties into one city, that it would be more efficient. You'd have a government that works for the interest of all the people in the entire region instead of just their own small area. You'd have decisions that were made for the good of everybody. And he believes that it would make it Albany, like, I think the 16th largest city in the country.
Yeah, because it would draw in, the bigger metro area might draw in more business.
That it would put Albany in a kind of more on the national map, draw more investment in.
The population that you quoted was something like 883,000.
Yeah, so you're talking about almost 1 million people, which, by urban terms is not an unusually large city.
But it is large enough that, it would be in the top 20, right?
Oh, for sure. It would just be a strange city in that it would be a pretty low density in most of its territory. That's why I'm a little bit skeptical of this is going to draw in investors and business people because they're basically just fooling them, right? It's the exact same place with the exact same number of people. Just because you're saying it's a big city doesn't mean it actually is any bigger than it was before.
But you also mentioned in your article that, a lot of people may be a little territorial in terms of politics, and that would kind of stand in the way of doing something like this, right? Like people who are, entrenched in their communities as kind of political leaders might find themselves or fear that they would find themselves out of influence.
For sure. I mean, if you are a progressive Democrat in Albany who's ambitious, you can bet that another progressive Democrat will be elected mayor pretty much from now until infinity, and likewise, if you're in Rensselaer County, that's a Republican bastion, and the Republicans there know that they have that stronghold. If you throw everybody into one big city, you get, at least in the short term, just massive unpredictability. Who knows who would be elected mayor of this place?
It would be like Beyond Thunderdome, right?
Yeah. And as I've said before in columns before when this issue has come up.
How many Mad Max references have you heard or have you made?
Yeah. But if you look at Toronto did a massive consolidation and got Rob Ford as its mayor, which seemed to surprise everybody, right? So that just goes to show the political unpredictability that you get when you throw masses of voters together who may not necessarily all think the same and vote the same and want the same things. I venture to guess that somebody who lives in Center Square in Albany has a very different view of what they want from their government than somebody who lives in Grafton.
For sure. So the big question is, if this ever came to be, what would this mega city be called?
Well, Chet thinks it should be called Albany, which does make sense. It's the most well-known name of any of them. I think it's more fun to imagine a new name, but that's just me just having fun with the idea. And that's kind of why I wrote about it, because I do think it is thought-provoking to think of what this would be like and the ways that it might be better and the ways that it might be worse. I mean, I think everybody pretty much agrees that this region is a little balkanized, where you have, Schenectady interested in Schenectady, Albany interested only in Albany, and, all around the region, people not really thinking of themselves as one big municipality or community, even though in a lot of ways they probably are.
That's one of the things that, it struck me as someone who was born and has lived, I guess, most of my life here. I guess you could say that. But I don't know. It's always felt to me like capital regioners know each other from, they can tell if whether they're from Albany or Schenectady, right? If you talk about pop culture stuff like Waterslide World or Secrets or whatever, like it feels like you have a shared identity, even if you were from a different part of the capital region.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do feel, though, I mean, there are a lot of people who, when they travel, just say they're from Albany, even if they're from East Greenbush or wherever, just because it's the most well known. But I do also think that there are people in Saratoga Springs who think of themselves as being from Saratoga Springs, and they say that's where they're from if they're traveling.
Well, identity is complex, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, this is just kind of a pie in the sky idea, right? I mean, obviously, there's some research behind it, and Chet Opalka has spent a lot of time thinking about it. But on a scale of, 1 to 10, how likely is this ever to happen, or some iteration of this?
So Chet believes that it is inevitable, that it may not happen anytime soon, but that the forces of consolidation are too big and the benefits are too great for the region to stay the way it is forever. And maybe that's true. I mean, maybe in 150 years, when the countryside is more suburban and Grafton has a lot more in common with Colony than it does now, or Albany than it does now, maybe it would make more sense. I don't think it's practical or likely anytime soon. As I say in the column, I'm not necessarily a consolidation fan. I tend to resist it. I'm kind of a small is beautiful person. I like small stores. I like I like small things, small governments. I just think that it's easier to have a connection with a government that's a short drive away or a short walk away than it is if your city hall is 45 minutes away. I don't think that's necessarily great for democracy.
Or traffic.
Yeah.
Although we already experienced traffic problems. That's not a new thing.
Well, Chet agrees that it's not like he agrees that the politicians are never going to go for it for the reasons we already talked about, right? Because if you have a base of power, you're going to lose that base of power. His idea is that there's kind of a groundswell where the citizens demand it and want it so badly that the politicians will be forced to listen. I think that's also unlikely. For that to happen, people would have to be pretty unsatisfied with their communities and with the region. And I just don't really feel like that's the case here. I think most people are pretty happy with life as it is. Every once in a while, Siena does a poll of Colony residents. And, Colony would be one of the biggest municipalities in this new city, right? It would, like 80% of people say they're happy with the way Colony is run, happy with life in Colony, think their taxes are appropriate, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just unlikely to me that people would turn and want to be part of something that is completely unknown.
What if it was like not exactly the scope that, would include Grafton and some of the outer areas? Like, what if it was more concentrated in the kind of urban area, a circle around the urban tri-cities or whatever? What if?
Yeah, that would make some readers have said that. Well, they just say, well, it's a good idea, but he's just way too ambitious with it. Like maybe it would make more sense if Albany County was one municipality, or if Cohoes and Waterville joined together, or smaller things like that. And then maybe, I guess, if you do it step by step, maybe eventually you get to the bigger city that Chet's talking about.
Would that also mean that we would get a bigger airport that flies more places? Would that be something that came along with the consolidation?
I kind of doubt it. Part of the reason I did the column is because people often write to me and say, we should consolidate. Look at, the way schools are run down south, where you have these county-wide school districts, and people think it'll save a lot of money. Whether or not that's true, I think, is very much up for debate. As I say in the column, like, bigger governments are not necessarily more efficient than smaller governments, even though everybody seems to assume that they are. Like, in New York is not more efficient. New York State is not more efficient than Vermont or New Hampshire or Maine. It just doesn't necessarily work that way, that bigger is more efficient. There are people who always think it's a great idea, but it seems whenever it goes up for a vote, people vote it down. I think there was a vote
on a smaller level, right? Like nothing like a proposal that grand has ever been.
Right. I think the most recent example was in Tannersville, where they wanted to, if I get this wrong, I apologize, but I think the proposal was to dissolve the village and join the town of Hunter, and that was voted down. I mean, you can go back, and there are examples, many, many examples going back through the region's history. People just seem to like their individual places. They like their smaller governments, and there's good reason for that.
You can read Chris Churchill's column on timesunion.com. You can also subscribe to his newsletter there. You'll get his latest columns delivered straight to your inbox. We are going to take a short break right now. When we come back, we're going to share a little bit from our newest Times Union podcast, The Girl in the Pond. It's a true crime exploration of one of the region's oldest cold cases, the murder of Hazel Drew in 1908.
Why is healthcare so expensive? What's happening with climate change? And are elections safe? You can find answers to those questions and a lot more with Capitol Confidential from me, Dan Clark. I give you the latest news and analysis from the state capitol and beyond. Sign up now at CapitolConfidential.com. That's Capital with an O, confidential.com.
If you're enjoying this podcast, take advantage of all the Times Union has to offer and support our efforts to bring you award-winning journalism by becoming a Times Union subscriber today. Go to timesunion.com/subscribe.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Eagle, a Times Union podcast. I'm Jessica Marshall. We told you earlier this summer that we were hard at work on a new podcast project. Well, the wait is over, my friends. This week, we launched The Girl in the Pond, a true crime limited podcast series about the unsolved murder of a young woman in Rensselaer County more than a century ago. Without further ado, here's a snippet of our first episode of The Girl in the Pond. If you spend enough time in one place, a town maybe, or a city, you start to hear things, stories, about things that happened to people there over the years. More than mere gossip. I'm talking about tales that have been passed around so often and embellished so much that they become the stuff of legend.
New York's capital region is full of these legends. Many of them center around Albany, stories of political intrigue and smoky back rooms usually, of titans like Roosevelt and Rockefeller, and of literal and figurative ghosts that walk the halls of the state capitol. But if you leave the city limits of Albany and travel east across the Hudson River to rural Rensselaer County, there's a true crime story that's been rattling around the hills there for generations. An unsolved murder most foul.
Not everyone has heard of it, but if you're familiar with American pop culture, the plot may sound familiar. Very familiar.
It's a mystery that we here at the Times-Union have written about for more than a century, but we've never told it this way.
I'm Jessica Marshall.
And I'm Patrick Tyne.
This is The Girl in the Pond. This podcast is not about a ghost story.
But it starts with one.
The ghost story that we're starting with here comes from a guy that we are calling Nate. Nate's in his 40s. He's tall, with broad shoulders and a big voice. Athletic, a bit of a daredevil. But he's not necessarily the type of guy that you might think would tell you that one time he saw a ghost.
Navigating yourself down there once you get to the water, it's so raw. The rocks are so jagged. And it's just like it's crazy.
Patrick and I desperately wanted to hear his ghost story. Nate was game, and he suggested that we all meet up at his friend Todd's house. Todd lives in the small, rural hamlet of Post-and-Kill, New York. It's a one-stoplight town, about halfway between Albany and the Massachusetts border. It's pretty rural, a mix between rolling green meadows and heavy woods. Nate and Todd both grew up there. Patrick and I met Nate, Todd, and Nate's girlfriend Sierra there one day this past spring to hear his tale.
Yeah. So this is all your property?
Todd's property is pretty cool. He lives in a Civil War era farmhouse that's right on the edge of Barberville Falls. That's a 92-foot waterfall. This is where Nate says he saw the ghost during a party a few years ago.
I didn't even think about that. You all right?
Yeah. Just watch once in a while.
You may happen to be wearing loafers and are not prepared for a hike.
Or heels, you know.
Yes. And they said, oh yeah, we definitely have to go down into the woods.
Right.
So we go down this very steep gravel road into just this, 100-foot tall trees as a canopy and rocks, and you are very much in the woods. And
feels a little bit like Tolkien's Middle Earth.
Yes, and they brought that up. Like, this is like you could see just hobbits like jumping out, at any moment.
I was envisioning something a little darker than hobbits, but sure.
Maybe we were the hobbits on our adventure, and who knew what we were going to encounter. But
the ring wraiths.
Yes. But we end up in this kind of clearing on a rock, and this is definitely the place to hear the story that Nate is going to recount for us.
Nate's story takes place on a dark summer night in the early 2020s at a party in Todd's backyard.
Like Todd said, we were over here. It was a gathering. I was sitting by a fire. My buddy Scott was sitting directly to my right, maybe about as far as I am from you. Mm-hmm. I had turned to my right, and I saw the face of a woman, a younger woman. She had kind of poked in like this, her face. This close. Yes, like in my face, smiling, and I was just kind of coursed through me. I looked and back, and she was gone.
Nate turned to his friend Scott, who was sitting right next to him.
Scott, did you see that by any chance? He's like, what? What do you mean, man? I'm like, nothing, I'm like, you didn't just see a woman sitting right here? He's like, he kind of looked back at me. Like, what the hell are you talking about, man,
Did he just see a ghost? Maybe it was just a trick of the light. He did his best to shake it off and turn his attention back to the party.
5 minutes later, our friend was walking, and she was coming up kind of like that area where that hill began, into that kind of social area, and there's a woman walking next to her who I literally thought was like, why is this woman dressed like this, kind of a thing, And she turns off and vanishes.
It was the same strange woman whose face that he had just seen, or thought he had seen.
She had a white shirt on, like a blousey shirt, a long black dress, and what I thought at the time, only thing compared to was a giant, a middleweight belt or something like that you would win from I didn't really understand. It was come to find out, it was a female cummerbund, and she had a big wispy hat on, and she just went right up. It was pretty gnarly, and I go up to Bailey, and I'm like, the second time, I'm like, hey, Bailey, did you just have, I'm like, what, was someone just walking next to you? She's like, it's crazy you say that. She's like, I felt like something was right behind me. I'm like, now at this point, I was like, this is loco, It was pretty off the chains. I'd never seen.
Nate pulled everybody at the party. No one else had seen a woman dressed in old-timey clothing. Dude, what are you even talking about? He pulled out his phone and he called his girlfriend Sierra. He knew that at least she would believe that he saw something.
At the time.
When he called me at 3 a.m, going on and on about seeing a ghost, I started to look into the cemetery that's nearby.
One detail that we forgot to mention up front, Todd's property is across the street from a cemetery. One of those really old ones that you'll see dotting the rolling hillsides of New York and New England. You'll see gravestones there that date back to the Revolutionary War.
I was on the internet and I was looking at gravestones, just kind of glancing at names, and there are a few pictures in that grave site that people are buried there, and I sent him one because I was like, oh, what about this? Because what he described looked like this person.
One of them was a grainy, old-timey black and white photo of a young white woman. She was looking right at the camera. She had big round eyes and pouty lips. She had light hair that was swept expertly up into a pompadour. She actually looked like she could have been a classic 80s prom queen if she had lived in a different era. But she died in 1908. She was only 20. Sierra sent the link with that photo to Nate. When he opened it on his phone, the hairs stood up on the back of his neck. The apparition that he saw at the party looked an awful lot like this young woman. Her name was Hazel. Hazel Irene Drew.
She had like a very jokingly, like, kind of like
the energy brought her in. It was like everyone having such a good time, and it's very close to the area.
She thinks that she was flirting with me. Did you say that at one point? Like that?
I joked, and he took it really seriously.
For weeks, it was all Nate could talk about. At that point, he now firmly believed that he had seen the ghost of a 20-year-old woman who died 120 years ago. It was Hazel Drew. It had to be. He was sure of it. One day, not long after his encounter, Nate got a call. It was from a local guy named Mark Marshall, no relation to me. Mark Marshall told Nate that he wanted to know more about that ghost girl that he saw.
He had called me up. He's like, what was she wearing? And I had explained it to him. He's like, that's literally what she was wearing the night. And he was saying something about the hat. I was like, I don't know. It was like a weird hat. And it ended up being, what would you call it? It was a peacock hat with peacock feathers with like garnet on it or something like that.
Yeah.
After hearing Nate's description, Mark Marshall also became convinced that it was the ghost of Hazel Drew. And then he revealed to Nate that he's been desperately trying to solve her murder. You can listen to more episodes of The Girl in the Pond at timesunion.com/podcasts, on the Times Union app, or wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes drop every Tuesday. That's it for this week. We will be back soon with more from inside the newsroom. The Eagle is a production of the Times Union. It's produced and edited by myself, Jessica Marshall, with help from Erica Smith and the Times Union digital team. Our music is Flyin' by Top Floor. Special thanks to Chris Churchill for his contribution to this episode. Got questions or comments about the Eagle or any of our podcasts? Please email us at podcast@timesunion.com. We want to hear from you, listeners.